Old Man Orange presents a brand new podcast, Octorok Talk.
I've got my Indian vest and half a loaded gun. Not enough to make it out, it's just to get the job done. Cause in the wild, wild west you gotta take what's yours, leaving the money for somebody who can hit the floor. Every day we just try to have a little fun, press and repeat on the piano to while we're still young. Cause in the wild, wild west it's hard to not recommend it. Here you can't buy love, but for a price you can rent it.
Hello, this is Octorok Talk. I am Ryan Dunnigan,
And I am James Artville.
and today we're going to be talking about fandoms and I guess when do things get toxic, and not so much like totally blaming the fandom or anything like that. More of like who's kind of more to blame in this situation. Is it the fans of this franchise, or is it the franchise itself and the way they kind of handle themselves in certain situations? Now, I know this is all basically just opinion, so if few people walk away from this getting pissed off, sorry about that. But there's just more, rather than trying to look at like who can we blame, who can we get pissed off at, it's like how'd this happen in the first place. So so we'll go through this anyway. We're going to try to avoid, because I feel like every other podcast today is seem like, who's to blame, SJWs or alt-right shit, and I'm going to try to avoid leaning on that too hard, but I'm sure one way or the other it's going to come up, because that seems to be one side accusing the other. So, anyway, James, is there any like particular, because I noticed like I can't help but kind of go through, like, I don't even look for it. It just pops up in my YouTube feed or my Google News feed of just like, so-and-so who worked on Star Wars said this about Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy said this about George Lucas. Or, people in Marvel shot back at the fans. It's like every other day, and you kind of read it and you realize, oh, that is not nearly as bad as the headline makes it out to be. Or sometimes, oh, that is pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's clickbait. Make it as as extreme and bodacious as possible, to generate reactions, to generate, views, revenue, get people talking about it.
Yeah, I guess it's working, because we have a whole podcast dedicated to it. But it's also one of those things of like, you'll read something every so often. You'll read something like, oh, how does this constitute as news? You'll like read a headline like Adam Sandler loved Sonic the Hedgehog, and you read like the article like, oh yeah, I saw Sonic the Hedgehog with my family right before the whole shutdown happened, and called Jim Carrey, told him I thought he did a good job. I thought he did a good job with the role. Like, he loved the movie. It's like, oh, okay, all right, well, what Adam Sandler thinks of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, I'm sure we're all dying to know while people are getting infected every other day or every day just about. Well, as long as Adam Sandler liked Jim Carrey and Sonic the Hedgehog, I think we're all good. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic, but yeah. I guess one of the more, this kind of happened right before the shutdown. We talked about it briefly on Old Man Orange, but Marvel seems to kind of have a bad record recently with fans in Marvel the comics, not the movies, but the comics, because they have a tendency to crowbar in very progressive stuff, and a lot of times, well, I think it's half and half. Sometimes I haven't been really keeping up with all the books. I think sometimes it really works. Like they had Falcon, because they're doing it in the show now too. Falcon is Captain America, and that's an example where like I think that really works. If Captain America is going to step down for a minute, it makes sense Steve Rogers to come in, because that's like, as other than Bucky, that's one of his best friends, so makes total sense. Who knows him better? But then you get these other situations where they kind of, or like Miles Morales, who the Into the Spider-Verse is really probably really the best Spider-Man movie, and so there is definitely stories to be told. And sometimes you get people like, oh, they're just trying to crowbar diversity, but then there are other times it's like, no, there is something to tell. But then there are those other situations where, okay, you're trying a little hard. I don't want this thing to get canceled because it's not for me, but I'm not gonna pick it up just because it looks ridiculous. I'm sure you heard, and it's old news by this point, but I'm sure you heard about Marvel's New Warriors, right?
Well, no, I have not.
So the New Warriors was I think they were around as far back as the 80s, maybe the 70s, but they had a big comeback in the 90s, and they're very of the moment, like a very 90s team. And I'd be lying if I said I knew a whole lot about them. I know they have Nova, and I know they have Nova, and I think maybe Firestarter. It was just this weird oddball team of Marvel characters, most of which I don't even really know. And then they go and they say, well, it always kind of represented the here and now. So what's popular with kids right now? So they have all these technically political... I mean, I don't like this phrase because I think it's overused, more sensationalized, but I guess politically correct team of superheroes. So they have a character named Safe Space and Snowflake. And
I can't help but just... How could you not laugh at
it sounds
that?
like a parody. It sounds like a parody. I'm sorry. It sounds like a parody. And the whole thing is, so they're twins. They both look rather androgynous. Snowflake can make snowflake shurikens and throw them at people. And Safe Space, they say he's like a big typical jock. I'm like, you look at him like, I'm not sure you guys know what a typical jock is, because he's like got shaved, kind of like almost bald head, but bright pink hair. He's dressed in white and pink, and his whole power is he can make force fields around people, but not himself. So it's like, okay, all right. And then they also had another character who looked his whole thing like, oh well, his whole thing is, I don't remember his name by this point, but his thing is he's like an Asian kid who got dosed with his grandfather's internet gas, which I guess is a thing in the Marvel universe now. And so now it's like he's able to, I'm sure they're going to put it in that he could hack into something, but the way they described it is like he can instantly pull up information, memes, whatever, and he's like obsessed with memes and all that. And just like he's basically has the power of a phone, but he is the phone more or less, and kind of communicate with anything. And just like, oh, okay. And then there was like another kid who's like, this one kind of pissed me off, and I know it's probably meant to be more of a joke, but they have a character called B negative, and he's a vampire. He's kind of like linked to Morbius in some way, and his whole thing is he's like what was it? He's like all into emo. He looks like an emo kid, but he's into old music, like the Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana, music of the yesteryear.
Yes.
You know. So it's like, oh god, you know.
Do they realize that the majority of comic book, customers are in their 30s and 40s, and you're gonna make them feel old? It's not gonna resonate well with the majority of their audience. They're trying to attract, I guess, and connect with the younger audience, sure, but by the numbers, they are the minority.
Yeah, and I guess the thing with that is because comic books have steadily been declining, because realistically, if you look at it, I mean, who knows if they're going to eventually just cancel. They always, like every few years, they seem to tease that we're going to cancel Marvel, we're going to cancel DC, and then someone puts out a very clickbaity article like, is Marvel going to buy DC? It's like, no, they're not. They're not going to buy. Marvel and Time Warner and Disney hate each other. They are not going to let. They're not going. If anything, Marvel is not going to own DC. Maybe in 20 years, but not anytime soon. They've been talking about like maybe we'll just have cartoons and T-shirts and movies, but we're not going to do the comics. And they've been threatening that every so often, and they more keep it around for just the legacy is the way people bring it out. But ever since comics started to get a little deeper in the 70s, and then they started to get really good in the 80s, and once they started doing that and started adding in more adult themes, since then they've kind of fluctuated on sales because, oh my god, these comics are really good, but it's not going to get, you have something like Dark Knight Returns. It's this very deep contemplative story about Batman, so it's going to age people out. So a little kid can't read Dark Knight Returns, or a little kid's not going to be in a Dark Knight Returns. So I think they're trying, and that's only gone more and more and more with comics recently in that direction. So it feels very like panderish when you have a character like, well, what do kids like? Well, they like political correctness, right? And they like memes. They like SoundCloud, whatever that is, I feel like that it's just this weird attempt to try and bring people in,
The problem with putting memes and fads in your stories is they get outdated so quickly. Like you can read a piece of media or watch a movie and just look at the phone, if in that story, and that will tell you a lot about the time when that was created and the kind of generation that they're trying to connect with. And memes, they come and they go. Like every week there's a new meme. So once you have that published in the comic, it's there forever, and we're going to be reading about it 30, 40 years from now, and it's not going to mean a thing. It's not going to be important.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what you want to do, because I feel like there are those comics or even movies, they come out in a particular time, and you look at it like, sometimes I think that's interesting, sometimes I think, what are you guys doing here? Because I'm thinking back on certain movies that are blatantly 80s, like very 80s. Like a lot of John Hughes movies. You look at those probably back in the 90s, and people are like, oh my god, these are so 80s. How can you... This is so cheesy and of the moment. But then once you give it like 20 to 30 years, people start to go like, oh, I kind of miss this. Oh, that's different. Now we got like... Apparently, when we were in high school, the big comeback was 60s and 70s music. 80s was still kind of viewed as kind of cheesy. Now, younger generations, they don't really care. The cool retro thing isn't 60s and 70s. It's 80s and early 90s. And I know this because I got two nephews. And most popular thing, I also have a few friends that are teachers, and they tell me like kids are obsessed with like 80s new wave. Most kids don't a lot of kids don't care about rock and roll anymore. Most kids like either like new hip hop, or if it's something, they might like 80s like synth, or 80s new wave, that kind of thing. And their favorite show is like Stranger Things. So it's kind of, it all kind of fluctuates. And looking at something like New Warriors, I don't really know how that's going to be looked. I mean, first off, I don't know how many issues it's going to last, because the people it's aimed at aren't probably even going to read it. But I'm thinking like there are things from the 90s that are like painful to watch, but there are other things like, yeah, it's definitely of the moment, but it's interesting. You know what I mean? It's kind of an interesting little time capsule. But I guess it depends on how much you're leaning on. Like I can think of a good example and a bad example. I like this writer generally, Mark Miller. Miller spelled with an A. He did the Ultimates back when Marvel did their relaunch of the Ultimates. Well, they started like, we're going to start from scratch. It's going to be the Ultimate series. Here's Ultimates, which is basically Ultimate Avengers, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, X-Men. He was doing Ultimates, which is Ultimate Avengers. And it was very of the moment, which in some ways worked. And it was kind of saying, okay, if you were a superhero, you would be a celebrity by this point. And to kind of help fund your product, you coming back, they try to make a movie about you. You would have all these contract deals, and they're bringing that in. Like, okay, that's interesting. And there's a part where they were all joking around, like, who would play us in this movie that's coming out? They're all joking around. And they're going like, oh, Matthew McConaughey would play you, ha ha ha. Samuel L. Jackson would play you. Funny enough, that did happen. and then they get to Bruce Banner, and Hank Pym is like, oh, wanna who would play him? That mouse from the Stuart Little movie. It's like, I had to close the book and come back to it. Like, I need a minute.
Well, Stuart Little's, been around even before our generation. I mean, yeah, the live action movie came out when we were, younger, but as a franchise, I mean, it was a series of children's books. Our parents are familiar with Stuart Little.
But at the same time, he says like that mouse from that Stuart Little movie.
Okay, so yeah.
And at this point in time, how many people are referencing, you know, like, oh, you know, like Stuart Little, like Stuart. Oh, okay, all right, you know. So there's that
movie
and then you get
went.
Yeah,
it's gone.
Yeah, you got that, and then you got. I'm gonna bring back Dark Knight Returns for a minute. Yeah, that's pretty 80s, and Reagan is still president. But it was still kind of saying something about the 80s. It was saying something about, you know, the punk rock movement, Reaganism, the Cold War, might makes right, that whole kind of idealism. So at the end of the day, I think those are two examples. Like, this one aged pretty well. This one, I mean, it's still a good story, but there's certain references. We're like, oh, come on, dude. And it's just kind of confusing when like Marvel tries to whenever comics try to be very of the moment, it usually backfires in their face. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I guess the question with that is like when fans got a little bit more of like when something ages, when something doesn't. I guess when fans like, I guess this is a situation like his fans were like, this is like most hated thing Marvel ever put out on YouTube. Like dislike ratio was through the roof to like ratio.
Yikes! Yeah, if you're gonna do a timepiece, you know, it makes sense to include social, economic events, historic events, political events. You know, those things are, you know, kept in history books. Those are the things that are taught years later. A movie reference, a pop culture reference, those things, you know, those aren't concrete. They're not written in stone. They come and they go. You know.
Yeah, and it's like. I can't help but this is a case where, I mean, not to the point of going and harassing. That's let me say this. When it comes to talking shit on these things, it's not so much going to the point, and I never take side with going and harassing the people who wrote it or make it online. But it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want this. I don't hope this book gets like destroyed or anything. I don't hope they like cancel it. I hope these guys never have jobs again. But just like one of those simple things, like I think this is an answer to everything. So a little premature saying this, but just vote with your dollars more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hit and miss. Some things are home run, and some things are foul ball, and some things are just strike out. Try again. Next batter up, please.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I cut you off there. My bad. There's a delay.
Yeah, but really, what gets me worked up nowadays is seeing references to the floss. You know, that Fortnite dance? I still see that in movies.
The Fortnite dance?
Yeah. That's something that I that I feel like, okay, you know, it lasted, you know, a few weeks, you know, big deal, but movies nowadays are still referencing it. It's already a few years old. And
yeah,
I think,
or like they don't do dabbing as much as they used to.
Yeah, 10, 20 years from now, like the floss will go down, but I think people are going to forget where it came from. I mean, unless Fortnite just continues to dominate. I mean, I don't know. It's people still play it. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, like I see that, and I kind of feel like it's a cheap cop out. You know, like, oh, they're trying to monetize or, you know, take advantage of the popularity of this game, this, you know, this meme, what have you. I feel like there's no originality in it. You could just have any TV series, movie, or whatever, just have a moment where somebody flosses, you know, and I don't know, it has the adverse effect with me. Like I don't like it when I see it.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, because you look back on, you know, old. I could think back on like people like our parents' generation saying, "Oh, this is just a phase. Watch this thing go away. What's good video games gonna do you?" Now video games is this industry that's still here, and you see people, not everybody, of course, people on YouTube making millions playing video games. You know, so it's one of those things like shows what you guys knew, but at the same time. And that's just a generational thing. That's not me talking crap on, you know, just that generation. That's just a generational thing. There's always going to be something that the older generation pushes against, no matter how open-minded they think. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to understand TikTok. I don't think I'm ever going to understand TikTok. And there are some things I was going to like, I'm not going to try and push against it. I'm not going to try to tell you like, you kids are like, what's wrong with you? I'm just like, I don't get it. I'm not going to try to get it. I'm just going to let them do their little TikTok challenges and their little, I don't know. The more I look into it, the more I get angry. So I'm just going to look away and just like, you guys do what you're doing.
See, that makes you the odd one out. Other people get angry too, but then they comment and they harass and they troll. You keep your voice to yourself, so good on you for doing that, holding some self-restraint.
I don't know how I came across it. I think there's a podcast called Your Mom's House, and by Tom Segura and Christina P, both stand-up comedians, wife and husband, and they often have segments where they pull weird videos, whether it be from YouTube or TikTok, and they'll like comment and make jokes about it, and I mean, I'm not going to give them crap for it because it just brings certain things to light, and I don't know why, but for some reason, I guess me watching that started bringing TikTok stuff into my feed. And there's this one of this girl who looked like she was probably maybe like 15 or 16, I don't know. And she was wearing a Bernie shirt, and there's a song, like this high-pitched song with like a hip-hop beat, like, okay, boomer, and she's doing this, doing that. I'm like, just doing all these like cute, like, ooh, me poses. And I'm just like, I felt like, the end of 2001 Space Odyssey when there's all the colors and lights flashing in his face and he can't take it. He's like, ah, like he doesn't know it. He's like almost having a seizure. Yeah. I felt like that. Like I don't know what's going on,
Yeah, you're not.
I guess I need to sign up for like a retirement home now because I'm there.
You lost it.
So I guess going back to the main thing, I guess there are times with Marvel where it's trying to be very of the moment and it just backfires. And I think the thing with Marvel is not to totally put it all on the fans, because I think I'm very much against, like, oh, you corporate shill, you freaking cuck, whatever. I'm against all that kind of crap. But there are times where Marvel has this, when they do get a little bit of criticism, they kind of speak very general. And I guess when you got someone beating down on you and talking shit all day, eventually you're like, give me my phone. No, dude, don't. Just give me my phone. Here's what I think of all you little trolls out there, because that happened with like some of the Marvel execs. It happened with like, not Marvel execs, some of the Marvel writers and artists,
They have to pick their battles. They have to be, I mean, if one person who has a lot of, higher up power regarding publication, regarding commenting, any PR work for that matter, and they get triggered, and then they post. I mean, like, they can lose their job, because they have their company, their brand, their reputation on the line. And I've seen a few cases where somebody speaks out of line, and then like the next day, the company apologizes on their behalf, and of course, mentions that consequences were made, retribution. They fixed the issue, and by the issue, they usually means they got rid of that person in charge, the person behind the keyboard at that moment.
I just want to. They put out they go on like some talk show, or they end up putting like a post on Twitter. Like, when I said all Jews suck, I didn't mean it like, yeah. I'm sorry, that wasn't me. It's always something like, it's not always like something is even as bad as that. It's sometimes as bad. It's just as much as like, now someone could segregate that, take that out of context and play it somewhere. But no, it's always one of those things where it varies from case to case. Sometimes people like, it's like, I'm like, all right, people are overreacting. There are times like, dude, what are you doing? But I guess that's the thing about Twitter and Facebook now. And there was a point in time where if a celebrity or someone high up got pissed off, by the time they had to organize the press conference, like, I'm over it, so, because I mentioned, I brought this press conference today because someone in the comments section said this, so I have to say back to them, like making hard eye contact with the camera. Mm-hmm. So I think that was something you don't have to worry about back then, because you have to worry about, by the time you actually but you had time to think about it and get like, you know what, but now it's like, yeah, that could, like you said, cost you your whole job now. So not that I ever really get in Twitter fights, but I hardly even go on Twitter. It's almost been like a year since I've really been on Twitter. So it's like, I'm horrible about promoting this stuff, but I'll have to get better about it. Another thing is, because I feel like this one's a little bit more gray. Every other day, I feel like I'm hearing something new about like Star Wars, old fans versus new fans, or original fans versus Disney. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or trying to find ways to redeem, the prequel trilogy, if it's even possible. Like the Clone Wars finale, it redeemed the original trilogy, and here's 25 reasons why.
And here's 45 reasons why you're stupid if you don't agree with me. Some listicle comes out, yeah. I never watched Clone Wars, because I'll be honest, the Clone Wars, I mean, people tell me it gets good, it gets better. I watched the movie. In the movie, I'm like, this sucks. And then I watched a couple random episodes, and I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. There's Boba, there's Bosk, there's all these other characters. That's cool. They're trying to make Boba a badass, even though he just goes into a hole. But at the end of the day, people make it out to be like, oh, well, he survived. Which, whenever you hear that stuff, it always just sounds like fan fiction. But apparently it's canon, or I don't know what is canon anymore.
Yeah, apparently he's gonna come back for the Mandalorian season 2. Boba lives.
So I guess he did survive, because that was one of those things. Like, did he survive by this point? Did he not survive? Is that still canon? Who knows? Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Boba Fett. There's a time when I was younger, like, he's awesome. Then I really thought about it. Like, fans made him awesome. He was never really that awesome, going by the originals. But anyway, when the new series came out, actually, let me finish Clone Wars. Sorry. So I can believe Clone Wars got better, and it got more deeper as it went on, but my other thought process is, I know where all these characters end up. This green dude with the dreadlocks and the big black soulless eyes, he may be the main character of this episode, but I know he goes out in 5 seconds when they fight Palpatine, so why am I going to get attached to this guy? That lady over there that looks kind of like older Ahsoka, yeah, she's a badass in this episode, but I know that, she just falls into a pit in Star Wars Force Unleashed or whatever, and you know what I mean? That's kind of how I always feel about all this stuff. Like, maybe there is all this cool expanded stuff, but I know how these guys end, and it always ends like, whoa, Count Dooku, get away! Well, of course Count Dooku's gonna get away. He's gonna die in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, that does make it hard to tell engaging stories when the mystery is gone.
And granted, in like Revenge of the Sith, or the prequel trilogy, whether you love it or hate it, you know where Obi-Wan and Anakin end up at the end of the day, but at the same time, you're at least surrounded by all these new characters. You don't know, that they're more than likely going to die, because they're not in the later films, but you want to know, what's their story? What happens? Where do they go? So that at least, whether you like that series or not, that at least, like, all right, there's a mystery. I don't know who all these guys are. Let's follow their story. But when I already see how they're going to die, and now we're going to learn about them after the fact, it's like, But going back to the way Disney's handling Star Wars, because I feel like this is probably the most gray area here. When they first started, I was very much a Disney defender, and very much just the way they were handling it. And when they came out with Last Jedi, I liked Last Jedi. I wasn't blown away, but I was very much like, all right, guys, you're really overreacting here. It's not a perfect movie. It's flawed, but, in all honesty, I think Last Jedi, it's kind of like one of these movies where it has the guts and has the ingredients to be one of the best Star Wars movies, but because of a lack of direction and lack of coherentness and just weird timing in certain parts, it was a little clunky and weird choices here and there. So it's like, okay, other than the prequels, this is probably my least favorite Star Wars movie. But whatever. I liked it. I didn't love it. I liked it. But then they come out with the next couple movies, and they have this track record of hiring somebody, firing somebody, reshooting it, adding this, taking this out, this and that, back and forth. And I'm like, maybe and then you find out there really was never really a big, solid, concrete plan for this whole thing. And you're like, it really feels like somebody's like just fighting for the stick. Someone's just pulling back and forth on the stick. Like, I want it. No, I want it. You know, oh, she is a Skywalker. She's not a Skywalker. You know, now I'm like, I don't know. Now I found myself in the middle. Like, I feel like there are people who look for reasons to get mad about it, but at the same time, I feel like there is some mishandling of it. You know what I mean?
From a storytelling perspective, there are a lot of payoffs that disappoint. A lot of things that were worked in ahead of time, foreshadowed, hinted at. Loading the gun and prepping it, but then it never fired. You know, there's so much expectation, and that's what makes this new trilogy so different. I mean, the original trilogy, you know, our parents' generation, when they walked into Empire Strikes Back, they were open-minded. They no preconceived conception of what to expect, of, you know, where the story would go, and that's why, you know, the reaction at the end was so powerful, you know, on a cultural level. But nowadays, everybody has a theory. Everybody has their wish list of demands that they want to be met, and you know, everyone is across the spectrum from left to right, and there's just no way you can please everybody. No way, you know. And so, like, I don't know if Disney's trying to appease what they believe to be the majority, you know, or if they even take that into consideration or not. Like, who's the one who decides all these? Is it the directors? Is it, you know, the higher ups at Disney? You know, like you mentioned, like having a roadmap. I think they do with Marvel now. They didn't, you know, with the original Iron Man and Captain America and Thor. You know, having them together in the Avengers was a dream come true. That wasn't set in stone from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what made it so special. Now, of course, you know, they have everything laid out, phase 4, phase 5, like they know what they're doing. And with Star Wars, I think they kind of dropped the ball on that. They weren't as organized. Maybe they had too many people with their hands in the pot. You know, the more cooks you have in the kitchen, the worse the meal is going to be.
Yeah, I feel like going to, like, even Marvel, because that, for instance, going back to the cinematic Marvel, they're still trying to iron out certain deals, and I think you were the one to tell me. I looked it up. Like, they're hoping to eventually get Spider-Man and X-Men. They didn't have a way to do it, but they actually had an alternate scene for the stinger of Iron Man where Nick Fury comes in saying, like, if radioactive bug bites and mutants weren't enough, now I got to deal with the spoiled rich kid who doesn't want to play with it, doesn't want to share his toys. So it's one of those things where that was an alternate cut, and they didn't put it in there. Like, well, we can't promise this, so let's put this on hold, and hopefully we'll build up to it. And there's even talks about, like, an earlier, like, kind of like discount bargain bin adventures, because Ike Perlmutter, the guy who was running Marvel Comics, and who Kevin Feige at the time talked and had to get past a lot of ideas, Ike Perlmutter is, like, just a really cheap asshole, and he would just be like, you know what, why don't you just make it, how about we get one or two of the main people, and then, you know, get, like, War Machine instead of Iron Man, or make it, like, does it have to be all of them? You know, like, he was even pushing for, like, Captain America Civil War. He was like, does it have to be Iron Man? How about we get Mark Ruffalo? He's a lot cheaper. It's like, dude, have you read the comics your company has produced? You know, so... But eventually Kevin Feige went to, I think, Bob Iger or someone in Disney and just said, like, look, if I still have to ask him for stuff, I'm quitting. So what do you want to do? How do you want to do this? Do you want the, you know? And since then, Marvel's been, I mean, it was already on a winning streak, but since then, their ideas are a lot smoother and a lot more concrete because you got a guy who cares making it. And thing about Star Wars, I believe that people involved care about Star Wars. I believe Kathleen Kennedy likes Star Wars. I believe Rian Johnson likes Star Wars. I believe J.J. Abrams I believe they all like Star Wars. Thing is, Star Wars is a very different thing to a lot of people. It's like, are you someone who only likes the trilogy? Are you someone who came into Star Wars and likes the prequels and the trilogy is kind of old to you? Are you a kid who grew up watching the Clone Wars cartoon, and that to you is Star Wars? That's what Star Wars was to my nephews. I mean, they liked the movies, but one time I was talking to my oldest nephew, and he's like, "Oh, I totally forgot Anakin becomes Darth Vader." I'm like, so it was one of those things where, and it was, if he heard this, he'd call him out like, "Uncle's an asshole," but it's like, don't call me out like that. No, but it's one of those things. Star Wars is too, and like there you get people who maybe the movies was their door, but then from there they went on and looked at all the expanded universe comics and books and all that. So Star Wars is too many things to too many different people. So I think when you don't have a focused, narrowing line of what it could be, I think that's where it gets a little muddy. And I think Kathleen Kennedy is somebody, because everyone talks about like Star Wars has too many agendas, and it's like the agendas never seem too forced. I mean, no pun intended. I mean, they never really seem too forced to me. It's like, okay, there's one of the main characters is a woman, a black dude, and an Asian lady, and that's a problem. What? I mean, it's a galaxy full of people and aliens. Why is it weird that we suddenly got a little bit of diversity?
I know, like for our parents' generation, I'm thinking of my mother specifically. She only, watches Star Wars, or maybe one of the biggest reasons she likes and enjoys Star Wars is because of the original trilogy actors. So like having Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher, and definitely Harrison Ford reprise their roles, like that was a big deal. And so that's why I think The Force Awakens did so well, is because you had those old faces, and the older generation, it was nostalgia for them. And as their roles and their screen time diminished, in the subsequent films, I don't think the older audiences really stuck with it, because they didn't connect with the new cast, with the younger faces. They probably couldn't care less. They just wanted to see more of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Chewbacca. To them, that is what Star Wars is.
I like the three main leads, and I'll be honest. When it comes to the new Star Wars films, let's just stop at them. Mandalorian's probably the best thing of all the new Star Wars things that have come out. Not trying to be that fanboy, but I think that's probably the best thing of all new Star Wars. But other things like Force Awakens and Rogue One, I really like both those movies. Both those movies are well made. Both those movies are timed out. And yeah, Force Awakens is more or less a remake, but at the same time, I think that's a good, all right, let's back to form. There's enough different about it. I think the one thing you could have done differently is make it where it didn't open on a desert planet. It could have been anything other than a desert planet. I think that's the one thing that, like, just to mix it up a little bit. But regardless, that's a good movie. It was fun, and it kind of, returned an old feeling to you. Now, I don't have a problem with it going and being experimental and making you question your heroes or dissect values of older films or the previous generation. I don't have a problem with that, but I feel like, because ultimately what Last Jedi is about, it's ultimately a movie about failure, but still there's some weird narrative lines they put through, and I guess my big, I guess as time goes on, Rey, Finn, and Poe, the three of them, their story isn't as interesting as it goes on. It starts off like these are great. This is a great tee-off for these characters, but they're not as interesting. They almost seem less developed as the story carries on, if that makes any sense. Because I feel like even you hear what Colin Trevorrow's, I think that was his name, Colin Trevorrow. You hear what his story was going to be for the original Rise of Skywalker. It wasn't called Rise of Skywalker. It's called something else. Duel of Fates, actually, which is another thing. They're trying to redeem the they're trying to redeem the prequels, kinda. That sounds more interesting. I mean, I don't think we needed a 4-hour movie like his originally was going to be, but I still think it sounds like an interesting concept, and it sounds like more of what I kind of wanted to see, because I kind of reached out and tried to add more to it rather than just try to alter it and like ignore this over here,
What bothered me about like specifically the Rise of Skywalker was the relationships between, Rey, Poe, and Finn. At the end of the movie, they're all, they're hugging, they're holding hands, they're in victory. I didn't feel it was earned. I didn't feel like I know, from The Force Awakens to Rise of Skywalker, there's a lot of time in between. And I think that you lose a lot of those moments where they build, and grow and develop that intimacy. In the original trilogy, I feel like that intimacy was earned. It was something that you saw on screen happen, and so you were engaged and you were rewarded by the end with Return of the Jedi. I can't say I followed or felt the same way regarding the protagonists in the new trilogy, and I know that's the direction they were going with, and I have no problem with that as far as the story goes. I think that there was a lot of missed opportunity to have more of those slice of life moments, and a lot. I think a lot is assumed that happened off screen, and the story suffers for that.
Yeah, and I think another thing about that is you said that for older generations, a lot of it was, let's see Harrison Ford again, let's see Carrie Fisher, let's see Mark Hamill. To me, I mean, when you're younger, it's just like Luke Skywalker. That's more or less the avatar for the audience. That's me, The thing, when looking back at it now, though, and the thing about something you could say about the prequel trilogy is it does do this thing where, how do I put it? It does do this thing where it suddenly makes it feel more like Darth Vader. Because after you watch the prequels and then you watch the original trilogy, it's like, oh, this is actually a story about a good man becoming bad and then ending on a good note. That's ultimately what this is about. But then, and Luke Skywalker suddenly seems slightly less important. And I'm not going to totally blame the trilogies for that, the prequel trilogy. But Luke Skywalker suddenly seems more of like the guy who just had to be there to give him that nudge rather than the chosen one. Like, it almost makes it kind of more interesting. Like, oh, he was never Luke wasn't the chosen one. He was just the guy who gave the right nudge to the chosen one. That's kind of interesting. So for that reason, Luke Skywalker is never really that great at his job. And that's fine. That's fine. That's actually kind of interesting. And in the expanded universe, we just saw him starting to get good in Return of the Jedi. He was just starting to get good. And you could say, oh, well, he did some backflips in, like, Empire Strikes Back. But, I mean, realistically, Return of the Jedi, he was a lot more competent, a lot less arrogant. He was just starting to get good. So, I know he's older, so he can't be doing backflips and all that, but I still feel like there's something he could have been doing rather than just hanging out on a robe on an island, hanging out with some, like, trolls. I honestly think there's more things that he could have done with that. And there's even, like I don't know, because he just seemed like, I get the idea that he's at his lowest of his lows. He feels like he failed. He's jaded. He's like, what's the point? And I understand what they're trying to make a yin and yang. He finally came to the middle rather than totally light, because you see flaws in the light, and I understand that. But the following film didn't do anything with that. Like, I liked Rise of Skywalker, but here's the thing. You ever see a movie where you watch that movie and you're like, I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. Hopefully the next one does a better job. That's what Infinity War was to me. I watched Infinity War and I liked it, but I wasn't blown away. I'm like, well, hopefully the next one makes it all worthwhile. And then the next one totally made it worthwhile. Endgame is like one of the best Marvel movies ever. One of the best comic book movies ever. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to watch Endgame again. Like, Endgame's a lot better now. Endgame's a lot better because it was worth it. It was teeing it up. Rise of Skywalker and Last Jedi don't have that connectivity to them. I kind of like Last Jedi a little less after seeing Rise of Skywalker, because it just doesn't. They don't feel like they're as connected. So it's like, all right, well, what was the point of some of this?
Yeah. I mean, Luke Skywalker, he didn't become a Sith or anything, but he kind of failed as a Jedi. And to be fair, like, I mean, he only had like a few weeks or months of training with Yoda. I mean, in the Return of the Jedi, he considers himself a Jedi Master, and I'm thinking back, like, really? I don't know if you've earned that title yet. I mean, you're like the only Jedi in the universe, so I guess no one's going to fight you for it. But still, comparative,
it's graded on a slant.
Yeah, there's still so much,
or on a curve, whatever you want to call it.
So much he doesn't know. So much that there's no one there to teach him, unfortunately. But
And Palpatine's like, oh, really? Guess what? Lightning hands. Oh, I didn't see that coming, did ya? He's like, Daddy! Or like, all right.
and yeah, it's no fault to the actor. Even Mark Hamill was disappointed with how they handled Luke. And it's not his fault. But yeah, that was probably the biggest letdown, me personally, regarding the story is what happened to Luke.
And of all like Star Wars actual movies, the only two movies I do not like are Clone Wars and Attack of the Clones. Clone Wars is okay. I mean, Attack of the Clones is okay, but those are the only two movies I just flat out like, whatever. I don't need to watch these again. But everything else, I'm like, I like it to love it. And I know Phantom Menace, Revenge of the Sith, both flawed movies, but I still like them. I can't, they're enjoyable. There's some major things like, why'd you do that? All right. But still, overall, fun movies. And then even these new ones, I like them, but I want to do more than like them. I want to love them. I want to be, I want to have, because I remember watching Force Awakens and Rogue One and being like, oh man, these are awesome. They're right back on track. And then since then, there's been this weird fluctuating, like, it's kind of hard to keep track of them, where they're going with it. So, and I understand, this is a case where I do kind of understand some of the fan outrage. Initially, I was like, okay, you guys are overreacting. And you do have some people that I feel like are looking to get mad. They're looking for any little thing to get pissed off. And they just want to keep on poking at it. But I understand some of their frustration with, the way, because like I said, Star Wars is a different thing to a lot of different people. And you do have people, I think, making Star Wars, like, all right, we're making Star Wars for the new fans. This, like, stop acting like this is yours. Like, you're right, it's not theirs, but at the same time, they're the ones that kind of stuck with it the longest, so you should probably, try to somewhat appease them, not just flip them the bird whenever they point something out. I mean, it reached the point where Mark Hamill was talking crap, the guy who voiced Darth Maul was talking crap, and you had, like, there's a lot of them who sign Indianese or whatever they're called, but,
See, the thing, too, is the younger generation, they expect more, but they're less likely willing to pay for it. The younger generations now they take things for granted. Like, they want things for free. They want streaming. So when it comes to buying power, we're the ones who are more willing to actually put down money for the things that we want to see. And so if we're not happy, losing out on our buying power is a big deal. I want to circle back on something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned your love for The Mandalorian, and I just want to make a brief comment about why that makes such good storytelling versus The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. I think the movies, there's a trade-off. They were so epic, so flashy, so intense, versus like The Mandalorian. Yeah, it had its moments of action. Decent CGI. Really impressive stuff. But for the most part, it was slower paced. It was character driven. It was conversations. It was dialogue. It was, drama with the interactions, the suspense and the intensity of, the villains and the heroes. Even when they're not, fighting each other, they're in the same room together, and their conversations are enough to make you on edge. What's going to happen next? And that's just, I think really good storytelling. And so I think that's the trade-off. The bigger movies were so flashy that you lose those intimate moments. You lose the writing, the dialogue, that The Mandalorian is just, it's a great series, and I can't write you a list of exactly why, but to me that's something that speaks to me.
Well, another thing about Star Wars is, and I'm wrong, I love Star Wars, but ever since I was a kid, the conversations felt very stilted, and it felt like we're in another world, because they're not having casual conversations. The most casual person and most realistic person in Star Wars for the longest time was Han Solo, because he's like the only guy who doesn't want to be there. He's gonna do his job, but he doesn't. Like Harrison Ford didn't want to be there, and it shows through his acting, and it works for the character. Even when Force Awakens came out, like Harrison Ford doesn't care about Star Wars. That's great. He doesn't care about Star Wars. Want to know why? Because it comes through his character. Because Han Solo he's gonna like, I guess I'll do it. All right, I sure, why not? That's Han Solo's whole personality. So that's why I think that's fine if he doesn't even like the character. I'm okay with that. And it's not even about what I'm okay with. I just think it works for the character. Well, Mandalorian is one of the only times in Star Wars I've seen for a long time. I'm sure there's other examples you look long enough, but it's like people are able to have conversations in this other world, and they still feel like that's a real conversation. There's the episode where they're breaking into that prison ship, and Bill Burr, of all people, is playing an ex-Imperial sharpshooter. I'm like, you guys got Bill Burr? All he can play is, I don't like it here. What's going on? This is stupid. That's kind of his whole persona. He's just like, are you shitting me? That's kind of his whole attitude. So the fact that they got him to play a jaded ex-Imperial now mercenary, that is brilliant casting. And it's one of those things where it's like their conversations they had there for a second. Like that's some, like, you know, he says like, oh, he was one of the Empire's best sharpshooters. That's not saying much. He's like, I wasn't a stormtrooper, jackass. You know, like there's things like that. Like, like I think that, and it's not like the most amazing, well-written show, but it's a show that's well-written enough and something you don't see in Star Wars. Like there's a part where there's the two stormtroopers just hanging out.
Oh,
like,
I know.
He's going on another massacre.
That was...
Just, let me see it. Like,
that
yeah,
was unexpected.
you know, like that. Yeah, like,
in a pleasant way.
Yeah, it was almost kind of like the Quentin. It almost seemed like a scene out of like a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies. They'll have conversations between characters that are not necessary, and sometimes he has too much of that. But it's not necessary, but you understand those characters a little more, or you understand that world a little more because of that conversation. We don't get that very much in Star Wars. Seeing two stormtroopers who suck at shooting, like, what are we gonna? I don't know. How long is he gonna be? I don't know. Someone cut him off, so you know what happens when someone does that. Yeah. So I think Star Wars needs more of that.
Yeah, I mean, like that. The stormtroopers get, you know, parodied so often. I love the fact that they did it themselves. You know.
Mm-hmm. And like so. Yeah, I think that kind of covers Star Wars. This Star Wars took up a much bigger chunk of it than I assumed it would. So I'm just going to jump on to, I guess, a more relevant of the moment one. Unless there's anything else you want to cap off with Star Wars.
Oh, I'm sure down the road we'll retread these waters.
So you said you haven't really kept up. You don't really know about this so much. Last of Us Part 2. I guess that's the more recent one. Now, you said you never played Last of Us. The new one's yet to come out. There's a leak recently. Now, Last of Us, for those who don't know, is a very well-received video game. And it's a very basic zombie story, but the human connections between the two main characters, Joel and Ellie, is very, very well written and very well acted. If I'm being 100% honest, it's probably the best acting and writing I've seen in a video game. Maybe not the best story, because the story is very basic. It's just, let me get this girl. It's basically The Seekers, more or less. Let me get this girl from here to there. She annoys me. I don't like her. By the time that ends, though, they're going to be caring and worried about each other. Or kind of like True Grit. Kind of like that. And it's one of those things where it's a very basic zombie survival / Western story. But it works. It works. And it's very well written, very well acted. Now, the sequel's coming out soon. And there's a leak, and they say that it's a big combination of things. This is another one where I feel like it's a little gray, but we don't have all the information yet. And this isn't like deep dive theories, nothing like that. But essentially what ended up happening is there was a leak, and at first they said it was a disgruntled employee, and they say it's not a disgruntled employee. Who knows by this point? I'm sure maybe it's out there somewhere. But regardless, they've released cutscenes, among other things, and I'm not going to say who or what, but basically something happens for some particular characters, and they're characters people really like, and they're just like, really? That's how you do it? And then you suddenly switch off at some point and play as someone else, and it's a character that kind of came in out of nowhere, and they're saying this is pushing some kind of agenda since you're playing this particular character. Now, it should be noted that the first Last of Us, you kind of switch off between Joel and Ellie between certain moments, and through, I think, a DLC story and other conversations here and there, they get across that Ellie's a lesbian. And, doesn't feel too forced. Like, okay, feels very natural the way they did that. In this one, apparently, at some point, you switch off between characters, and you're playing, apparently, I don't know, this is just what I've heard, apparently you're playing as a trans lady. And that, of course, pissed people off. And, like, I don't mind playing as a trans lady, but I guess the thing what they did is, it's a character they brought in out of nowhere, and they insert this character in place of someone else. And a lot of people are mad, like, wait, you're going to do this particular character like this, and then you're going to insert this character right here? Why are we doing this? And part of me kind of understands what they're trying to say or what they're trying to do. But then, people just, like, lost their shit on the internet, and because they even had cutscenes from different parts of the game. So it's like, well, it's hard to fake that, but who knows? Maybe it's an A/B storyline you could switch or choose.
Yeah, not having played the game, I can't comment really on whether or not that feels natural or forced.
So out of that, I guess without going too much into that, because I'm trying to, because I came across spoilers without even trying to look into it. If you hear the way I'm talking about it, you could probably narrow in one of three things that happens here. But I just don't want to be, because without even looking for it, I came across it. Like, it was like in a thumbnail said this. Like, you assholes, whatever. Might as well look into it now. But essentially, it's a very, Last of Us is a very bleak story, and this seems to have a very bleak ending as well, going off what this thing is. And you have people that are shouting at the top of their heads, refusing to buy it, screaming this, canceling pre-orders, and then Sony went out of their way, Sony and Naughty Dog, the company that made it, went out of their way, taking down any, like, people just talking about it, talking about the story, talking about what happens, copyright claiming just everything, even if they don't even show any of the footage or any screenshots and just talk about it, which is knowledge that's out there by now. They would cancel their channel. They were just trying to strong arm all these different YouTube channels and news outlets. And it's like, that's not really the way to handle it. So this is kind of one of those situations where in this particular field, you guys may have been wronged, but in another way, you're not handling it the best way. I'm sorry, that's not the most adequate way to say it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I remember when Endgame was coming out, Marvel was also having a really tight rein over what content was being discussed about it, to avoid spoilers. And, their motivation behind it was to enhance the experience, of as many people as possible. So, like, that, there was a noble cause. They weren't looking to, I guess, silence people for fear of their own reputation. They were trying to, protect people like you who just see a thumbnail and have everything ruined, But if the content itself, obviously, is controversial, and that topic certainly is, some people, have trouble, viewing that in their media, in their games, and they certainly have the choice not to purchase that. And I don't know, like, the Naughty Dog is not necessarily apologizing for the content, which is good. But if they're, doing this Big Brother, silencing, everyone, that's not helping their cause. It's not. I certainly have, less sympathy for them for doing that. Instead of feeling like a victim, it seems like they're acting like a bully in this regard.
It's kind of like, I think, a case where someone was to, I don't want to make it sound as bad as other things, but for lack of a better term, they were initially somewhat victimized, but then this happened, and it's like, all right, dude, you're overstepping your bounds. And even the case of because people might say that seems like giving them too much credit. I guess there was an article or expose that their working conditions weren't that great, and then to top it off, this comes out. So then out of that, people are like, well, there's still a lot of people, whether you like the company or the CEOs or whatever, whether you like them or not, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who worked really hard on the game, and now people are just throwing it out there. So I can understand like a lot of frustration with it. And I'll be honest, when it comes to most video games, I don't pre-order. I kind of wait and see. I don't go by IGN because they're just, it's IGN. Fuck them. But I kind of go by like I kind of see what a lot of reviews say. I'll maybe ask people I know what they think of this, and I'm like, okay, all right, cool, and then I'll make my decision from there. So Last of Us, I mean, I'll say this, going narratively off the story, I don't like the sounds of what they did, but I don't really know, hearing that out of context, out of nowhere, maybe it's worth it once you actually play the game. I don't know. But the thing about it is, it just seems kind of like it's too early to say. It's really too early to say. We don't know, but this is a case of a company overstepping its bounds and trying to play Big Brother, trying to do all these copyright strikes, and I'm not a big fan of that. But then once again, there are those people who anytime, another part of it is, anytime someone says in gaming, I'm not sure if you know this name or not, but anytime someone in gaming says, I'm friends with Anita Sarkeesian, it's like, oh, why'd you just say that, dude? You realize you're just like ringing like the dinner bell for so many freaking trolls. Don't get me wrong, I don't like Anita Sarkeesian. I think she's shrill and annoying. I can't stand her, and I don't have a problem with feminist ideals or anything. But she herself, she misrepresents a lot of information, and she's very, like, I think she does more harm to her cause than good. But and apparently they made the first Last of Us with some of her ideals and some of her things in mind, and ended up being a fine game. So and everything felt very natural. So maybe that'll be the case with this one too. But at the same time, it's just one of those things,
Yeah, and I'm sure this will eventually blow over. Once the game is released, give it a year or two. And if the game was good and it stands on its own merits, then this controversy will water under the bridge. But if the game is not received well, then it will definitely be like it'll leave a scar on the company.
If anything, this is going to be a game that who knows. I think that this game's still going to make a lot of money because you get people who don't keep up with all this. I mean, a lot of people like you and me. Well, me. I mean, I know you don't. You keep up with entertainment stuff, I'm sure. Maybe not this particular game, but we might keep up on this, and it might be in the back of our heads. There's a lot of people who don't, and they just like, oh, I like the first one. Let me get this one. And I'm gonna wait it out. I mean, I'm not totally disillusioned with getting the game, even though I think that ending or that plot point sounds stupid. But that being said, it could still be a really fun game. And isn't that the main reason we buy a game in the first place? I mean, you could want to play through a story, and a story for a game like this is very important. But I didn't play Last of Us just for the story. The game was fun. So at the end of the day, that's the main thing that has to happen here. So if anything, I'm fully expecting it to be a totally concrete, well-made game. It's just, where is it going to stand narratively? That's the question, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's Nintendo's policy. Game first, story last.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the game. Like, I'm not looking to have something tug at my heartstrings if I play a Kirby game. But I can expect that for maybe, depending on the Mario game, or they're still afraid to do that with Mario. I can expect that for a Zelda game, because Zelda is probably one of the more cinematic franchises.
It is, but even still, if you read interviews from the development process, the story is the last thing that they consider. It's always the gameplay first, the environment, the setting, the tone, and then they figure out, okay, what's going to happen? How can we tie these pieces together? But the gameplay, the mechanic, whatever gimmick, of the game is going to be, that's the thing that they work on the most.
Yeah. So, the people who do Paper Mario, I'm just kind of curious, like, all right, this time he's origami. What? Yeah, so that's the game mechanic, origami. Like, all right, we'll figure that one out. I mean, I'm sure that game's gonna be fun. Paper Mario games are usually good, but
I get confused. Like origami, folding paper. Paper Mario, he's always been able to fold into different shapes. You know, like a paper airplane. You know, or roll up in the tube.
yeah, I guess it's really origami, like much more of like I don't know. I guess you could try and make some kind of theme of like they're trying to fold you into something you're not, you know, something.
You know, even the environments. You know, they've always been 3D. They've always been paper. You know, folded and stacked and. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I haven't played every Paper Mario game. You know, I skipped. Was it the Sticker Star Saga?
Oh, I missed that one
And
too. Was that one for Wii U or the
I think
3DS?
the 3DS was the sticker one, and then the Wii U had the paint one, where all the toads were white and you had to paint them.
Oh. Oh, all right. Well, I remember liking the one for 64 and Thousand Year Door.
Yeah, Thousand Year Door.
Those are the two I played in lights. This other. Yeah.
Those were the true
Um,
Mario titles.
Though for recently, a few episodes ago on Old Man Orange, we've been doing Mario May, just been doing a retrospect on all these Mario things for May, and we did Mario RPG, and I probably like that one because I have a SNES Classic. I was like, oh, I can finally play this game, so did that for the podcast. I found myself liking that one more than the Paper Mario games, but still, the first two Paper Mario games are at least really good. The other ones I haven't had a chance to check out, but I'll get there eventually. Anyway. But all that being said, let's go to something I think we kind of covered Last of Us Part 2. I think another thing that actually, this one's old news by this point, but I think it is a good example of like, this is a case where I'm sorry, and I hope you don't take offense to this, because I know it's kind of more, but at the same time, I feel like this is a case where it is almost more fans. Don't get me wrong, there is stuff the creators probably could have done. I'm not going to give the show a complete pass, but I'm going to make an example of something. Teen Titans Go. I know that's not really relevant at the moment because there hasn't been any major controversies for it, but at the same time, I feel like that is a good example of when is a fan base expecting too much, and when is or you know what I mean, and when is the fans kind of like, all right, dude, calm the hell down.
Oh yeah. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, I was let down too.
Teen Titans, I remember. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a toxic fan, but yeah, I'll be honest. I was disappointed when I discovered the announcement for Teen Titans Go, because the original series was, you know, it was great, and it was getting better and better, you know, as it progressed. And season 5 ended on such a cliffhanger, and you know, even now there's a campaign to save season 6, you know, and bring back the original stories. My kids love Teen Titans Go, you know, so there's a market for it. You know, I understand that. They did watch the original series, and it just didn't, you know, they didn't connect with it as much. But man, they love Go, and you know, I took them to the theaters. We watched Teen Titans Go to the movies, and I'll admit that movie was very funny. I found myself laughing out loud on several occasions. And it's nice to see that they don't take themselves too seriously, and they're more than willing to poke fun at themselves. You know, the same complaints and problems that the fans voice. You know, they address those and they point them out. And yeah, you know, in a funny way. So if it's self-aware like that, you know, more power to them. And when it comes to the toxic fans, they address that as well. Have you seen the Teen Titans Go versus the Teen Titans?
Yeah, we covered it for an episode on Old Man Orange. Yeah, and they have the guy who's wearing a My Little Pony shirt, and he's holding a sign like "You ruined my childhood."
yeah. So he represents the guy who couldn't accept the change, you know, and he couldn't appreciate the Go series for what it was, and not just not appreciate it, but avidly hate it, and that's where the toxicity comes from. You know, just having those negative emotions and trolling and commenting and just hating on it, you know.
Yeah, it's one of those shows. I'll be honest. The original Teen Titans. I saw a couple episodes here and there, and I guess for me it was like I was still a fan of like original DC universe. And Justice League Unlimited were happening around this time. So I was just like, why is it in this wannabe anime style when it could be in? Because I think a Teen Titans show set in the traditional DC animated universe, like that sounds awesome to me. That being said, though, I'm like, all right, well, this show's not for me. Whatever, I don't really care. But then every so often, you or someone else like, well, actually, watch this episode or watch that episode, and I would watch it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this one's a little better. This one's so I believe it's a show that it's still not a show that I was totally in love with, probably because I didn't watch because it came out when we were like in high school, so it wasn't a show that's I really watched, and I don't really have that connection to it, but I'll go back and watch certain episodes, certain moments, and see, okay, there is something to this show. I wish it was here more often, and I wish they didn't have this weird, like, kind of like, Raven, you're going to have a birthday party, woohoo! Oh, by the way, the end of the world's going to happen. Back to the party, you know? So, it's one of those things, like, it's not my preference, but I understand why people like it. And then Teen Titans Go came out, and I'm like, whatever. I'm not gonna, whatever. And then I could always just point to my nephews. My nephews watched it, and I watched 3 episodes with them. And I was like, and I kind of felt 50-50 about that too. Like, there are episodes where I'm like, all right, there are episodes where they're just screaming and running around, yelling at the top of their lungs. And then there are other episodes where it's just like, that's legitimately funny. That is actually funny, and someone actually knows their DC Universe history. They know weird cut characters, even if you aren't even laughing at the show. If you look in the background, any brand or any stuffed animal or anything is somehow connected to like DC Universe. Like in the part in the movie when they're fighting, like you see a billboard for like a Ra's al Ghul Lazarus Pit spa, which to anybody else that's whatever. But then like to someone who knows DC, it's like, oh my god, that's such a weird random cut. Or someone's eating Mr. Freeze ice cream, or it's always something like that which makes someone like me notice it. Like, okay, that's kind of, I'll give you, it's at least fun to look for. But regardless, there are certain things in the writing where it is just characters just fumbling over each other, screaming, and I can understand if that gets a little old. But at the same time, there's also this thing that kind of crossed my mind, where when Teen Titans Go came out, there was also that point, or not first Teen Titans, I'm like, wait, Justice League Unlimited is getting canceled, but Teen Titans still going on? What the hell? And then Teen Titans gets canceled, and now Teen Titans Go comes back, like, oh, this is, and people got, not rounding you into that, but people got all, like, really pissed off about it. I'm like, oh, well, this knocked off Justice League Unlimited, so now you know how it feels.
It must have been really hard, too, because it wasn't just, like, a reboot. It wasn't the Batman animated series, yeah, there's the one that we know and love with Kevin Conroy, but since then there's been like half a dozen other new Batman animated series, and they don't last beyond a few seasons. But Teen Titans Go wasn't just like another Teen Titans show. It had the original voice cast, and I think that's what bothered so many fans, because you couldn't help but feel like it was replacing the original Teen Titans, not just a reboot in that regard.
Yeah, and like you said though, the show acknowledges that there's one where it's, I don't remember what it was some supervillain like, well, you know what? There's a Teen Titans before you that was way better. Here it is. They're just showing like highlights of the show. Like, oh wow! Then it's the last episode where like Beast Boy runs out into the light or whatever, and he's like, well, that's how it ends. Like, yeah, that's how it ends. You guys came in and you ruined it. So it's like it went from being, I almost don't even view it as the same thing. I could understand like, it's like, I guess if they were going to say, we're going to continue Batman the Animated Series, but we're going to make it the silly, wacky, funny thing, I can understand this in a natural knee-jerk reaction. But then you get people who are just like, I don't want to be this guy, because I usually side with the fans and maybe people making it rather than the producers. But producers, at the end of the day, it's like, you're not going to go out and buy, maybe you will, but a lot of people, it's like, they can't sell like Teen Titans toys to you guys as easily as they can some kids. So what is it? Because nearly every show, it's unfortunate, but nearly every good animated show was made to sell a toy of some kind, which is the unfortunate thing. That's the reason Young Justice only made 2 seasons. The ratings were decent, and the ratings were decent, and people liked it, but the toys weren't selling. The toys based off the show weren't selling at all. So then they just eventually said, well, even though it's getting good reviews, it's not aiming at the kids we want, so ex-nay this thing. And then they eventually said, you know what, we're going to make it full PG-13 when we go to DC Nation, or DC Universe app. So, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing with, I don't even know if that's getting a 4th season. I'm still watching, I just got the DC app a little bit ago, I've been watching through it, and it's pretty good so far. But it's one of those things that it's like, realistically, I mean, I love the animated universe. I love Batman the animated universe, but it's also like if they don't make another episode of it, I understand why, by this point. And I guess that people just want a little bit of closure more than anything on the Teen Titans Go, but I will on Teen Titans itself. But it seems weird that this many years and you go out of your way to make the Teen Titans versus Teen Titans Go, and they don't acknowledge it. They just got kind of trapped in this other dimension. They have to work together. And that movie was still more of Teen Titans Go than anything else.
Yeah. It was, something to appease the fans. It was more of a tease than anything, because at the end of Teen Titans Go to the movies, the post-credit scene there, where Robin says, hey, I found a way to get back. Everyone was assuming that was an announcement for season 6. And then we got that directed, the streaming Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans, which is, basically just like another episode of the series, for Teen Titans Go. So the Teen Titans, the original team, is more like a cameo, a guest starring the original Teen Titans. And yeah, it was a fun story, but like you mentioned, it wasn't closure. And I really hope that if we're not going to get a season 6, that maybe they'll consider doing another, straight to, streaming movie, similar to what they did with like Invader Zim and Rocko's Modern Life. Those movies came out recently, and they were, direct sequels to the series because the series didn't end, properly. And so instead of making another season, they just made a full-length 90-minute. Essentially episode, but in a way that was satisfactory to the story, and original animation that matched the style, even though it was 20 years later. I'm hoping Teen Titans gets that treatment. That would make me happy.
I will say on the side of the fans for that one, that's not an unreasonable request because enough people like it, enough people will buy it, and chances are I'd probably rent it to talk about it on our other show. So it's like, they make their money off that thing, definitely. And it's like, even like a good example of that is like kind of this, our fans right, or is the media right, whatever, however you want to go with it. Not the media, is our fans right or the creators right, depending on the situation. Rocko's Modern Life, since you brought that up, that was a good example just because that's literally like, I want the show from my childhood. Like your show from your childhood past, dude. It's different now. Why can't you? So I understand sometimes that there is this, I think something about our generation. I mean, I hate the term millennial just because it sounds so twerpy. Like, oh, you little millennial, you go play on your phone, But I guess millennials, I guess the thing about us is we're probably one of Generation X kind of held on to stuff a little longer, but I think millennials is the next generation to really kind of hold on to stuff. Because you have people from Generation X like, oh yeah, I still like Transformers, I still like Star Wars, whatever. But then you got people who, we literally have a sequel to the Batman comic book series. Batman animated series in comic book form. We're literally at that point, and that's only happening because enough millennials wanted it. And even though it was, like you said, a faint tease, the Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans, that right there, that's enough millennials wanting to see Teen Titans Go again, or the original Teen Titans again. So it's one of those things where I feel like something about our generation just wants to hold on to it and make sure it's all right. Star Wars is another example of that, you know. But the thing about makes Star Wars harder is there's a million, not million, but there's a lot of different versions of Star Wars. What Star Wars is to people and the way people view Star Wars.
Yeah, and Star Wars itself is more than just a single set of characters. There's lore that, you got the old Republic, you got the new Republic, you got, Empire, post-Empire, and New Order, and so you got a lot going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that there's just a lot there. I think that there's just, I mean, it goes without saying you're never going to please everybody, but there are those situations where I think fans need to learn to just not okay, it's no longer for you anymore. It's the next generation because you're not the one that's buying the toys. Why you're not the one watching Cartoon Network? And I will say that cartoons this day and age are better than they probably were a lot of times when we were kids. Not every situation, but I mean, I think 90s is when people who made I think how do I put it? Not saying people who worked on cartoons previously didn't care or there wasn't love for it, but I think 90s is where they started trying to treat it more maturely. That's where you had shows like, I mean, it's the go-to, but Batman, the animated series, had some deep, heavy moments in it. And you also had other shows like, maybe this show doesn't hold up as much, but I remember it being kind of heavier and darker for other shows at the time. The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest.
Oh, yeah.
I remember there being there's other ones. I know what I just said, but it just I haven't. I mean, most of the DC animated cartoons at that time kind of had that, and there's other shows that are just kind of escaping me at the moment. But I feel like since then, they've kind of slowly made more and more cartoons. I mean, I've watched a little bit of that DuckTales reboot since I have Disney Plus, and like, oh wow, this show's actually clever. It's actually well written. It's funny. Someone told me to watch Gravity Falls. I remember I was just always turned off by the art style. I'm like, all right, let me see what this show's about. Okay, I'll give it a shot, I guess. And watch like, oh, this show's legitimately funny. This show's legitimately well written, and they actually care about the characters here. So there is like not every kids show is a masterpiece, but there's a lot of kids show out nowadays that actually almost kind of made for adults also.
Yeah, there's this holy grail that if it was an equation, right? You have different variables. You have actually Rick and Morty, the story train. Have you watched that episode?
I watched that.
Yeah,
episode,
they talk about it perfectly. You have your different elements, your marketability, your relatability, and everything's a formula. And if you score high enough on all those marks, then that is a successful show. You please the producers, you please the company, they're making money, they're selling toys and merchandise, you please the fans, and then you please the storytellers, the writers who are telling the story they want. So if you can achieve all of that, you have success. And so some of these other shows, they might score high in some areas, they score low on others. So like you're talking about Young Justice, the storytelling was great, the animation was great. It didn't sell toys, so it was considered a failure. And then you have some shows that sell a lot of merchandise, but the stories were shallow. They were they were your villain of the week episodes. There was no progression, there was no growth. So Batman the Animated Series started as one of those villain of the week kind of shows. But I think it did eventually, they started tackling some deeper issues, and the storytellers wanted to emphasize less on the action and the marketability, and they wanted to actually take their characters and go places, and put them in situations that were uncommon, that were unpredictable, that were new, and that was something that made it stand out for the time. And since then, a lot of shows now, I think Teen Titans had those episodes where it was a villain of the week, but the ones that I love the most are the ones where they did tackle deeper issues, the ones where there were real consequences that were felt in subsequent episodes, in subsequent seasons. And then Young Justice took all of that and it perfected it. It's like every episode was a self-sustained story, but it was tied together so well with every other episode before and after that the narrative was just, it captivated you. It was a good story. And so like you mentioned, I think now cartoons these days, they're more than just glorified commercials. They definitely were in the 80s. Oh yeah, they were just commercials. A He-Man and Transformers, and they were just designed to sell toys.
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, Ninja Turtles. Yeah. So nowadays, there's even the creators now, storytellers, artists, they take pride in their work, and they want, they take ownership in what they do, and so telling a good story is definitely given higher priority now than it was 2 decades ago.
Mm-hmm. And I can understand when you got shows that are coming out now that are actually could encapsulate, can grab the attention of kids and adults. I can understand maybe adult like, hey, it'd be cool if this thing came out. But then you get people who, like you said, like I remember this isn't Teen Titans Go or it's still related to the cartoons, but it's like, God, I feel like I don't want to open a whole other Pandora's box of just, because this one seems a bit extreme, but I think it's a good example. Like you get people who they have this thing, they grew up with this thing, and they like it. It's a well-made thing, and they always want to be presented how they know it. Teen Titans Go is a great example of like, what the hell is this? It sort of resembles a thing, but it's not the thing. An example, and I don't know if they're still doing this, but I remember when Disney's talking about all their remakes and reboots, they're talking about, and this is old news by now, but they're doing a remake of Little Mermaid, and they wanted to cast a black girl as Ariel. And that's one of those things like, all right, I mean, I'll be 100% honest. I can see, all right, you're trying to be a little bit more socially aware and trying to be just more diversity. That doesn't bother me, but I see what you're doing. It doesn't feel like a sincere choice, but it feels like, okay. I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to be bad. It doesn't mean it's going to be bad at all. I think that it could go, depending on the way the movie goes, it can go either way. And that's not enough things to make it good or bad right there. It's just, okay, that's your choosing. All right, we'll see what happens. I'm kind of curious. And then you get people that were fuming pissed about that. I'm like, why are you really mad, dude? Why are you really mad about that? And regardless of whatever they say, it's one of those things where at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not racist. I'm just mad because they're turning a blind eye to, I don't remember where Little Mermaid's from, but somewhere in Europe. But like, it's not Norwegian, but I don't remember where it's from. But anyway, people just turn a blind eye to this country's history or whatever. And then I'm just like, are you really going to just be yelling into a camera over a cartoon? I mean, you're not even, is the movie really, I mean, sure, it's Disney, so more than kids are going to see it, but really at the end of the day, is it really made for you? Are you really, that's the thing that gets, when you get someone who's like in their 30s yelling about, I mean, I know that if you don't like it, you don't like it, but when someone's mad that like somehow what they're doing now, whether it be Star Wars, Teen Titans Go, or Little Mermaid, like talking about like, you've changed it, like, oh.
Hashtag.
It's new generation, dude.
Not my Ariel.
Is that still was that what it was called? Is that they did? They did have a hashtag for it?
It just came to me. But
not my mermaid.
Right, but that's the attitude. Some of them actually do kind of feel that they have ownership of they take ownership of their nostalgia. And then they use that as ammunition to they get defensive, and so they go to war. And mm-hmm. it's a battle that
no one's gonna really win at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. Just
I mean, Disney, like it's one of those things like I don't feel really either way about it. I do see that and I do like, okay, Disney's trying to look more woke or whatever, but I don't see a problem with them hiring this actress. I don't remember who it was, but I don't see a problem with it. We'll see what happens when the movie comes out. Because like, well, that's unrealistic. Like mermaids are unrealistic, So.
Yeah. I know we've already talked about this before, and I'm sure many people have, but this brings to mind the Sonic movie.
Yeah.
So there's an instance where fans kicked and screamed and cried and whined and yelled and something happened. They got what they wanted.
Well, I don't know. The Sonic one leaves me with mixed opinions because I don't know about. I know you like Sonic. I'm a massive Sonic fan, not in the DeviantArt kind of way, but that's one of my favorite characters. That's one of my favorite video game franchises. Over the last 15 years, he's been up and down, hit and miss, but regardless of that, I'm always going to love the classics. I'm always going to love the Genesis games. I'm always going to love Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic Adventure 2. After that, it gets a little dicey, but there's still good games in there, and there's still dog shit in there. But regardless, I still love that character. And that movie came out, and I liked the movie. I wasn't blown away by it, but I liked it, and it was better than I thought it was going to be by a lot. And I hope that they only get better with sequels. But I kind of liked it more than I thought I would, just because it was more of like this movie about... It was deeper than I thought it would be. It's a movie about loneliness. And let's be honest, there's a lot of like... There's like an article that came out some years ago that they think the reason why Sonic appeals to so many people... I'm not sure if it's a way of giving a backhanded compliment or backhand to the fans. They think a lot of Sonic fans have like autism and all that. They think it's something by the way the characters are designed, like the eyes and certain shapes about that, which attract them. I don't know if that's true. That's just an article that came out some years ago. But the fact that they made a movie about loneliness and you managed to give a reason why... Because he's always like throwing catchphrases out there. And you're like, oh, wow, the reason why he's always so, like, hyperactive and so, like, hey, man, it's a front because he's just desperately afraid he's going to be alone. I think that's taken, like, a quip machine and actually giving him a personality. And, like, all right, that's interesting. What are you guys doing about that? It feels natural, too. Now, sorry, I went on a tangent there. But the thing about that movie, when I first saw the silhouetted picture, I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna be awful, but let's see what happens. I wasn't like fuming at the mouth, but I was like, okay, really? Okay, that's what you're gonna do, that's what you're gonna do. Whoever made that choice is an idiot, but let's see what happens. And that first trailer comes out, and it is such a weird collision of like weird ideas and misunderstanding the character. They're playing Gangster's Paradise probably because... Well, people like retro stuff because of Guardians of the Galaxy, and that Us trailer, which was playing I Got 5 on it, got a lot of views. So let's find an old hip-hop song around that same time. And Sonic was big in the 90s, just like this song, so okay. And sure enough, it's like they ended up making a good movie, but I can't help but wonder, like, this is one where it is a little bit more confusing, I guess, because would we like it as much if he still was that weird abomination thing? Because there's not very much Sonic in that movie. They only have Sonic and you have Robotnik. You got a quick little scene in Green Hill. And then you got spoilers. Tails pops in for a mid-credit scene. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot of Sonic going on. So seeing a character that looked good and looked like the character reminded you, oh yeah, this is a Sonic movie.
Can you imagine what Tails would have looked like in that same style?
I imagine it probably would have been like the fox from Antichrist. He just pops out with a disemboweled stomach. He's like, chaos reigns! Credits.
Yeah. I'll be honest.
Gored. It's not disembodied. Degored. What's it called? Disemboweled.
I'll be honest. I would not have liked it as much. It would not have felt like a Sonic movie because it would not have looked like a Sonic movie.
To be 100% honest, I feel like that's a clash of... I don't think that was the director's choice right there to make him look like the way he did, because there's enough things in that movie that shows he knows Sonic enough. I honestly think that was a producer, and that was what they came up with before. That was some weird middle ground they met in. I think that's what they came up with for that particular design.
This is Paramount. So if you consider Paramount, like what they've done with other classic franchises. Take a look at what they did with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They tried to make them hyper realistic, hyper grounded in reality and less fantastical. and it was not well received. You know, it was uncanny
No.
valley. It's like you gave them noses, and you know they didn't have them before, little nostril holes. Well, they wanted to make them more human, and that's exactly what they did with Sonic. They wanted to make him more human, which is the problem because he's not a human. I mean,
He looked like he escaped from the island of Dr. Moreau.
yeah, and so and like the Transformers too. You know, I mean, they're robots, mind you, but they gave Optimus a mouth and a nose, and I always thought that looked really weird. You know, I always preferred it when he had his face, his mask on, because that's the way he looked like in the cartoon. And then, of course, Bumblebee comes around a decade later and fixes all that. It's like, oh, this is what they're supposed to look like, you know, finally. And it was well received.
Yeah. It's weird because I'll go back to Sonic in a second, but Bumblebee, for instance, like, it's weird because that was the first Transformers movie. I don't take Rotten Tomatoes that seriously, but that was the first Transformers movie where critics like, oh, that movie was pretty good. It was pretty good. But at the same time, there's that thing in the back of your head, like, all right, is it a prequel or is it a reboot? Because there's some things that come in the later movies, and there's some things that don't match up chronologically. So, like, he turns into a Camaro again at the end. So, just like, all right, what is this one? So, it's one of those things where it's just like, you know what? I think people liked that movie. I liked it, but I think people liked it just a little more, but because you didn't have Shia LaBeouf's parents eating weed brownies and for some reason acting like she's on PCP instead of edibles. And then you also didn't have like a giant robot ball sack swinging into a camera. You didn't have like an overly convoluted plot with Stan Tucci playing Merlin and somehow Nazis are involved and robots were always there and knights are involved. Yeah. I think that it was a grounded ET story with a robot is what made it like, oh, it's good. You the most basic thing possible, and it ended up being really
And
good.
the Cybertron scenes too. I mean, like it was like an extended 20-minute prologue. Those were awesome. That was the Transformers that people remember from the 80s.
Yeah, and I know, and like, yeah, maybe the movie's not perfect, but I think just the fact that like, oh no, it's just good enough. It's good enough, and that's all people wanted. And going to Sonic for that, I'm not sure how people, because there's even certain things about that when he's like, you know, they have the parts where he's creeping in and watching through the window of watching them do Speed, and just seeing that thing creep through the window watching Speed, like, I like Keanu Reeves too, you know, like that probably, like, that's, Sonic's a weird one because I did not have that reaction that everyone else had. I was just like, I was like, God, it doesn't look good. I don't know why they made it that way, but I'm probably see it regardless because I'm curious. But everybody just kind of gangpiling this thing. I almost wonder if that was a situation where the director already knew it was going to suck if they did that. And then he thought of this as a perfect excuse to go out there and just remake it the way he wanted to remake it. You know what I mean? I almost feel like that's how it is. Because there's too many things in that movie that seem smarter than it should be to release that character as he was in the first place. If that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Making a movie about someone who runs from their problems. His thing is Speed. He has not social anxiety, but he has a thing about, you know, loneliness. There's deeper themes in that movie than other movies like it. And they found a way, and he had that stupid god-awful design. I honestly feel like that Jeff Fowler never liked that design and was looking for an excuse to go back, and I think they used that opportunity.
Oh, sure. I'm sure it wasn't his decision. I think it definitely wasn't the higher-ups, the producers, who were the ones who made that call. And, of course, they're the ones who aren't invested in the character. They're not invested in the story. They just want to make money, and they trust the director, you know, to make a good movie, to make money. And they probably didn't listen to him even from the very beginning. He probably rejected those designs, but since they're the ones giving him the money and funding the project, they have the ultimate say. And somehow the feedback from the fans was enough to to help change their minds, you know. And from what I read, that the producers knew that some people were going to be dissatisfied. They knew that. They were expecting it. They just didn't realize that it was going to be as overwhelming, that they weren't, they knew that longtime fans weren't going to be satisfied, but they were kind of hoping that the casual viewer who wasn't as familiar with Sonic wouldn't care what he looked like. That the Sonic's reputation went beyond his design, that the name itself would trigger enough interest, or the fact that it was a video game adaptation. So gamers, just general gamers, would be interested. But that proved to be wrong. That Sonic's character and what makes him so timeless is the fact that his design is just spot on. The more you do with it, the less success you're going to find. It's like you really can't tweak his look without making it worse. It's that's how good it is.
I don't know why they haven't done this yet, but it is like, and people say, how dare you compare him to that? But at the same time, it's like, I think he looks better than him. And at the same time, I think that he also, well, obviously he pulled from him. It would be kind of like if you wanted to do a live action movie and have Mickey Mouse in it. And you suddenly say, like, we got to make him look realistic. So we got to give him these black, soulless little beady mouse eyes. Mice don't, let's make his big dopey yellow shoes. Let's make those Nikes. And let's also throw, I feel like, and they still made him Pumas, but they made it look, they blended it in better. The thing about that is there is like he is a character, regardless of the quality of his games, he's at least stuck around on t-shirts and toys because he is probably one of the most well-designed characters out there. He is literally this perfect, weird combination that was group focused so much in creating this almost like punk rock Felix the Cat. That's kind of how he always looked to me, a punk rock Felix the Cat. He has that classic 1920s, 1930s cartoon rubber hose design, yet he looks a little bit more modern. And something about that just, people have not let go of that. There's other characters that have gone by the wayside, and he's stuck around. So it is frustrating when you hear some producer being like, I don't get it, so most people won't get it, It's frustrating when you hear that. And I'll be honest, I was one of the people who was talking shit on it, but I wasn't one of the people like, how could they do this? I'm like, well, let's see what happens. Okay. And I think this is one of the few situations where everyone complaining about Sonic, usually I'm just like, all right, guys, just calm down. Just freaking calm down already. This is one of the few, cases where I'm like, that actually worked. That actually worked, and it worked for the better. I don't know. The thing is, I don't really want to, I don't like the idea of, bullying and pressuring. Not that I feel bad for studios, but I just don't like the idea of everyone sounding so whiny and demanding all the time. But to be fair, people also kind of dismiss the Sonic thing a little bit. Like, oh yeah, they redesigned Sonic. I heard some podcasts, people talk about it, very dismissively. Like, they redesigned that whole Sonic movie. Why? They didn't like the way his mouth looked or something. They weren't saying it as a joke. They just literally, they didn't like the way his mouth looked. Like, the mouth was a thing, but it was like the cherry on top. There's a bunch of other things going on that were just uncanny with that. And it worked in that movie's favor. They went back. I think that if the movie didn't have all this negative press in the first place, and then it swing back, do you like the new design? We got Tyson Hess, one of the most one of the most beloved people in Sonic fandom out there, to help make him. I honestly don't know if they just presented him as he was, I don't know if the movie would have done as well initially. If they just presented here is Tyson Hess Sonic, this is what he is, this is what he always was, I don't know if that movie would have got as much attention. I think since they bent to the fans overwhelmingly went out there, along with people who are like, oh, I played the games, let me take my kid to see this.
I mean, there's some people who would back the idea that this was all some kind of controversy, that this was some sort of publicity stunt of Paramount from the very beginning.
I don't think it was. There's too much work, too much time in that.
I believe that what we saw in the first trailer was all they made. So it's not like they had to rework the entire movie. so that wasn't the case,
Mm-hmm.
which saved them some money in the long run, because that would have been I think they would have said no to that. If the whole movie was already made, they would have just released it. So there was enough time to make those changes. But I don't think it was on purpose. But I do agree with you. I think that all that the negative press gave this movie a lot more spotlight. And the fact that they made the changes and they publicized the changes and people were talking about the changes, I think made people feel more obligated to go and see the movie, because they felt like, oh, they changed this because of me, and I complained so much. Now I'm obligated to see it because I need to prove to myself or prove to them that what they did was good enough, and yeah, so I that definitely helped.
Yeah, and that's like the situation. I think it's just because, first off, you have one of the most. I mean, I love Sonic the Hedgehog, but let's be honest, there are a lot of like crazy fans out there. There's a lot of crazy fans out there for anything, but Sonic also has one of the most vocal fans. Some of the most vocal fans, it seems. And anytime, like, I don't know, there's like, that is such a weird one. Like, I feel like I could almost do an equation and make sense of it all until we get to Sonic. It's like, we haven't figured this one out yet, So I honestly feel like there's something about that you could like, there are points in like superhero movies where the characters didn't look like the characters from the comics, and like, whatever, these nerds will pay to see it. But at this point, they've actually made the characters look good enough and find that happy middle ground. Like, Captain America's suit looks like Captain America's suit without having to be too cheesy, So I feel like now that we can make a dude dressed in red, white, and blue and not look super tacky, that, all right, well, what's your excuse for this character over here? So I know that's a different studio, but still, what's your excuse? They found a way to make it happen. Why can't you make a way to make it happen? And I think it's also them dismissing the fandom, like thinking, oh, the Sonic, that's a thing that was popular in the 90s. Well, he's still around. He's not as big as he was, but people who like it still really like it. Yeah, sure they do. Okay, give him fingernails and make a deal with Puma. We'll call it good. Like, all right.
I'm thinking of like the original X-Men movie. Everyone's just wearing black leather jumpsuits.
Yeah, that was very like originally. It's weird because Kevin Feige, he had so many connections and so many. He was a lot of movies we're complaining about. He was actually involved with, but he was the guy pushing it to be more sci-fi, more comics. I want to say I don't know to what level, but he was involved with Transformers. He was involved with some of the like Spider-Man, Sam Raimi. He was involved in X-Men. And I don't know if it was him or someone else, but I think he was one of the people whispering into Bryan Singer's ear, we got to give him costumes of some kind. Because at first, Bryan Singer didn't want to do costumes. He wanted them just to like, why do they wear costumes? That's gay. It's the 90s, so that's how they attacked. He's actually gay, so he probably wouldn't say that. But he's like, why we do costumes? That's weird. I don't get it. That doesn't make sense why they do costumes. So it was probably one of those things where he was almost, as time went on, they're like, well, what if we made it like motorcycle costumes? Like, why do they call each other Cyclops? This make them so. That's a stupid name. Why do they call them Cyclops? Well, because it's like a code name, and they don't want to say their real name out in public. Okay. He had to do certain things like that to almost get Bryan Singer on board with some of the choices that were made with that movie. So putting them in black leather was the middle ground they can make with that. And out of that, I remember watching it like, oh, we'll take it for now. But you better believe that now that Marvel has X-Men, people want to see Wolverine in yellow and blue or yellow,
orange and black,
and brown at some point.
I mean,
maybe not to the point of the fins on the eyes. I mean, I'm curious to see what they do, but at some point I'd like to see that.
I agree. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the looks. First Class and that generation of X-Men. They gave them their classic blue and white jumpsuits, and they pulled it off. I thought that was okay.
And it was smart the way they did it. They made it look like it was kind of like buckles coming down in the middle. So like, oh, all right, it resembles an X, but still looks like it has some functionality to it. So it's just a matter of just thinking outside the box.
And, you know, they're in that jet, flying to place, so it's like a flight suit, like a pilot would wear, on a jet.
Yeah, it makes total sense for that. And by the time you get to, for some reason, when you get to like, I don't know, the X-Men movies fluctuate with quality, but like when you get to the end of Apocalypse, they're all in their own badass version of their costume. Like, oh, okay, it kind of resembles their costumes from the comics. All right, cool. All right, next one happens. They're all wearing this lame Star Trek ass like blue and yellow, like very plain. Like, are you guys part of a cult? What are you? So it likes, but it's one of those things where that's neither here nor there's just sometimes that thing about like, what do they know? Like, I mean, you could only probably learn from other filmmakers and other production companies of like how they do this, how they do that. If that being said, I think a lot of times it's a director or producer not taking the source material seriously or misunderstanding what it is they have, like Sonic, not realizing, oh, this thing's way more bigger than we thought. We didn't think people would be this pissed off about it. And I think that that is one of the few cases where I don't feel bad for, I feel bad for Jeff Fowler because he was, at the time, because he was the director, so people were blaming him and attacking him. I don't think it was his choice. But I do feel bad for, him. I didn't feel bad for the producers, though. I mean, I wouldn't really condone just, like, that much screaming and yelling, but this is one of those cases where it worked. I didn't feel bad for the producers. Like, yeah, this looks horrible.
Makes me think of, like, the Mario Brothers movie, the one from the 90s. Like, the couple, the directors, they didn't even play the game. And I'm thinking to myself, why would you make a movie adaptation on a franchise that you don't even play, that you're not familiar with, you don't enjoy? It's like, you're the worst person to do it. Why?
Let me say this about, because we're in the middle of Mario May, and we covered that movie in a couple of ways, and I can say this sincerely. I legitimately love the Mario Brothers movie. I legitimately love that movie. That being said, I know it's not perfect, and I know there are flaws to it. There are things in that movie that, if you read the original script, which you could find on the Super Mario Brothers movie archive, if you find that, there is an original script that is actually very accurate to Mario Brothers, and it's actually a little bit more dramatic, and in some ways a little bit more deeper. That's actually, in by the time they went through like 4 other reiterations before they got to the movie they made, and the directors they got for it, I like that movie, but they seem kind of like pompous assholes who thought they had more of a vision, because they did a few. I think they made something that like was they were involved with Max Headroom among other things, and those are critically acclaimed. They're up and coming, so they were the next it thing, and they just kind of like, we have a vision, and then the studio came in like, all right, the script you're doing now, we're going to change it around to this, we're going to change it around to that, and they kind of went behind the studio's back and would go up to the actors and say, yo, this thing you've been reading for, it's not that, it's this right here. Like, wait, what? Yeah, this is what we're doing right now. We're filming right now, and they would almost, so they had their vision they wanted to make, and then even there are certain scenes and sets they couldn't use anymore because it didn't fit the script. So they had to just try and find ways around it. So that's why there's some weird things in that movie chronologically that don't make sense. I still like that movie. It's a fun, entertaining movie, and I don't say that in a snarky, hipstery kind of way. I legitimately like that movie, but I fully see, knowing the troubled production that it has, why it is the way it is.
Yeah, no, I
and there's some things in that movie. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I agree. It's tragic. What could have been.
Well, it's also one of those things where you see. There's some things in that movie where it's just like, oh wow, you actually found a way. It's basically, if you look at it like Mario Brothers through a dystopian world lens, which it still goes by the same rules of Mario Brothers, really. There's just certain things in there that I think are also coincidental. Like some of the things they say, some references they make. Some people are trying to make connection that Mario's girlfriend is Pauline, or inspired by Pauline. people trying to make a correction that Scapelli, the guy that gets turned into a chimpanzee, that's supposed to be a reference to Donkey Kong's at a construction site. I think a lot of that is just trying to... I think it's giving them more credit than they deserve. At the same time, though, I still enjoy that movie for what it is. There's something about... That was like not the first movie I saw in theaters, but one of the first movies I saw in theaters. And it was at a time when I was just getting into Mario Brothers. So you can't, it's kind of, no matter how many film essays talk about, here's why Mario Brothers is the worst movie ever made. No matter how many video essays about that get made, it's not going to change my opinion. I'm just,
Yeah, it holds a special place in my heart too. It's a fun movie. It's wacky. It's zany. It's a great kids movie.
That being said, even though I would love to see a sequel to that, I don't blame it if they don't make a sequel of that. I just hope the Illumination movie does more than just their typical Illumination stuff with a Mario paint job over it. I hope that is the case. They listen to the fans, and hopefully it finds... Because this ultimately comes down to, like we said earlier, when are the fans overstepping their bounds, and when is the studio just being... Or when is the production company just being stubborn and stupid? It's a case-by-case basis, I think it comes down to. And even by then, it's still, like, all opinion. Like, what do you think? We just said how we think. We're coming up on 2 hours now, so it's probably a good time to cut it off. But anyway, yeah, I guess just ultimately, at the end of the day, just vote with your dollars. And you're going to say something?
I think I would sum it up this way. It's not really a fans versus the producers. It really comes down to respect for the material. If the producers are disrespecting the material, then the fans are obligated to stand up and defend the franchise. And then likewise too, sometimes the fans are the ones, we're not the ones who are respecting the source material, and we're unrealistic with our expectations. And so really, I think that's a good measuring stick, is look at the source material and see if we can find some common ground. And the more you deviate from the source material, the riskier it's going to be. The more waters you're gonna stir up, and yeah, that's where the drama comes in.
That's far more eloquent than any way I could put it, so we're just going to leave it on that. That's a good way of putting it. Thanks, James. Well, anyway, I'm going to close on out now. Anything you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
Yeah, speaking of Sonic, I sell stickers on my website, and my Sonic the Hedgehog sticker is definitely my most popular one. People just love Sonic.
You just came out with your Inktober book from 2017, and you sent me a nice little package of a couple stickers, and I like the Sonic one so much, I actually didn't take it off and stick it to anything. I actually have it taped to the side of my my positioning's a little weird with my computer. I have it taped to the side of the monitor, so I look at it while I draw on my comm tablet here. And I'm like, I like it too much to actually permanently stick it to anything. So it's kind of this nice fusion between modern Sonic and classic Sonic.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's right next to a picture of me and my girlfriend. So there you go.
Nice.
And that's this week's episode of Octorok Talk. We actually kind of cut off the audio a little early there. Didn't get a chance to properly sign off, but I think we kind of said everything we wanted to say by that point. Anyway, just want to thank you for listening to this week's episode. We're probably going to be on the Old Man Orange feed for another 1 or 2 weeks, but then we'll be going over to our own channel shortly after. In the meantime, you can go ahead and look up James at jamesartville.com. That's where he has a lot of his work on there, especially his digital illustration and graphic novel and commission work. And anything Old Man Orange related regarding our podcast, our comics, or Spencer's Comic Pizza Boys, or any old cartoons he made, go to www.oldmanorange.com. From there we have our links to all our other websites. Anyway, you folks stay tuned and take it easy. Bye. The music for this episode, the opening music, was Wrong Place at the Right Time by Them Strangers, Spencer and Marshall's Old Man. And the closing song we have is Staff Roll. It's a version of Staff Roll, the ending song from Mario 64 by Game Chops and Helliant off Mario and Chill. I might be mispronouncing that, but Helliant is spelled Helynt, and game shops. You can find them on Spotify and plenty of other areas. I got this right off iTunes. Check them out. It's pretty good music just to chill out to while you're working on something.
Hope you enjoyed that brand new episode of Octorok Talk. Look for more zany fun at oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comic books, cartoons, and all that other fun stuff.